Awesome.
So
Hi,
good
everyone.
afternoon, everybody. Just hold on. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So this section is the section 2 in the series of Azure Nigeria community. We started in the beginning of this month. So we have amazing speaker for the section 1, which we just concluded. And today, this one is the section 2. And we are going to be focusing on introduction to Azure ML Studio and building your first machine learning model. By the way, my name is Imo Etuk, and I'm Microsoft MVP. And we have Oluwa Damilola Remu, who is a technical lead and is an experienced technical lead with a demonstrated history of working in the information technology and services industry. So she's going to be sharing her knowledge with us today as we remain quiet to learn from her and also share our ask questions and feel free to interact. This section is going to be an interactive section, so feel free to ask questions. Thank you. Damilola, come forward. So it's your time. How are you today?
I'm fine, Mr. Imo. How are you doing too?
Okay, I'm fine too.
Thank you
Thank
for
you. So
hosting
the
us
floor is
today.
yours.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to today's session. Like Mr. Imo said, we are talking about introduction to Azure ML Studio and building your first machine learning model. My job this evening is just to intrigue you and make you see why you would want to, build on the Azure ML Studio, right? So I'll get right into my presentation. And first, before we jump into the Azure ML Studio, I want us to understand the Azure ML life cycle. So I'm not a data scientist, and I would like to ask, do you have any data scientists on the call? If you are, you can just show your hand and like raise it. But if not, then I guess we are mostly infrastructure guys, and we'll just talk infrastructure then. But the ML lifecycle is important even if you are an infrastructure person or you're just like on the DevOps side of things, because you need to understand the people you're supporting, right? And for every ML project or job, it starts with a data set. And the first data set we have is an historical data set, something that you have pulled from maybe an accident data. We have common data like the Titanic data set, or maybe inflation data, stuff like that. Their historical data set that has been pulled from somewhere. And to use it for your ML job, we usually would have to split it into two, which is the training data set and the testing data set. So of course, the training data set is what you use to train your model, and your testing data set is what you say will be used to test the model after you have trained it. Now, for every ML job, there is always an algorithm that you apply. So if you're just joining, we are talking about the ML lifecycle to help us understand how the Azure ML Studio can be very useful for you as a data scientist, right? And one of the algorithms we'll be looking at today, we have various algorithms, but we'll be looking at the linear regression algorithm in our demo later. And after you use the algorithm on your data set, then you want to evaluate it and say, okay, this model I've built meets certain criteria. And because it meets this criteria, then it's correct and good to be deployed. And once you can confirm that, you can deploy it as a model, and then other people can now consume it. So it's when it's a model that you can push to be deployed, and people outside can now use it for their own job, like prediction, classification, and the rest like that. So that's really what the ML life cycle is. I hope that was like very simple to understand as we go into the next slide. So what is the Azure Machine Learning? I know it told you already talked about some of the offerings that Azure gives when it comes to AI. Now, the Azure Machine Learning is a cloud service for accelerating, or let me just put it, for managing your ML projects, really, for managing your ML jobs. And one of the common things I'm sure everybody on this call is familiar with is DevOps. We talk about DevOps. DevOps is a culture that blends your development and operations together. And guess what? We also have ML Ops, right? That enables you to merge your ML operations and your ML jobs together, so you can like flow through it from beginning to the end. And that's one of the importance of your Azure Machine Learning Studio, that you can engage the ML Ops culture on your Azure Machine Learning Studio. So of course, why we're here is the Azure Machine Learning Studio, and it would be wrong to not define it. So it's like an environment where you can build your models, you can train models, you can deploy models, you can monitor them. It's like a end-to-end model, an end-to-end platform where you can walk through your ML ops life cycle from end to beginning. That's from your data to deploying and to even monitoring, like we talked about on our life cycle, right? So I'm just going to talk about reasons why you might want to consider the Azure ML Studio. Number one, it's cost effective. It's a pass offering, right? So usually it's pay as you go, and it doesn't matter the kind of organization you are, whether you are a small organization or you are a large organization, you can use it because it's based on the workload that you put that you're paying for. So whatever machine learning workload you are deploying on the studio or any of the resources there is what you pay for. Also, like I've said countless times as I've gone into this, it's like an end-to-end machine learning lifecycle. So you can go from scratch to bottom. All right. And then there's this very nice feature about your um Azure ML Studio. It's the automated machine learning. What that does is it frees you up of the stress of having to code and write any kind of programming languages to deploy your model. You can actually just deploy a model quickly without even coding or extensively, or maybe just little coding, right? And I think that even for people who are not data scientists or but are willing to like just learn the process, it's something that you can work with. Enables you to talk about scalability and performance, which one of the benefit of the cloud, because imagine that you want to train a data model on your laptop, and maybe your laptop is just 2 cores or 4 cores. Just imagine how much of a drag it will be. But using the cloud, you can scale, and also it supports performance, right? You can use your workload efficiently on the cloud, and you can actually deploy large models using the cloud. So from small to enterprise level projects, you can make use of your Azure ML Studio, and it's user friendly. And we're going to see that today shortly that it's one of the most user friendly things to pick. That's the Azure ML Studio. It's not like so tough or hard for you to use. Okay, so how do you access your Azure ML Studio? There are different ways. Some people like, well, there are different reasons why you might want to access your Azure ML Studio in different ways. But first, there's the coding option, right? And you can use your Visual Studio Code to access that. So I'll try and show that shortly. Because what we're going to do majorly is like just demo. I'm introducing you to it, so I don't want to just like talk through words. But yes, you can use your command line interface. So if you are already familiar with Azure, you can install your Azure CLI for ML on your computer, and you can use that with Visual Studio Code to run your code to the cloud. And next, you can actually just use the cloud model. You can also use Python SDK kits, right? That works for data guy, and then you can use the Azure ML Studio, which is what we'll be looking at majorly today. So I'll just see, I think I would launch my Visual Studio Code and just, okay, let's see. All right, so I'll just run through the slide, and then we'll go through all of the things I've talked about. Now, when you launch your Azure ML workspace or studio, there's something called the workspace. And the workspace is how you manage your resources in your Azure Machine Learning Studio, right? And as we create it, we will see that it comes with a storage account. Now, I know that for this series, we've looked at, I think we've looked at storage, but your storage account is usually where your data is stored. So it could be a blob storage, but whenever you upload a data to, or a data set rather, let's use a data set to your Azure ML Studio, it is stored in the storage account where you can easily retrieve it again. Then we have the application insights. Like I said, it's an end-to-end life cycle. So you can monitor the ML jobs, how they're doing, the models that you have deployed. You can monitor it, see how it's doing. And then we have the keep vault for storing secrets for applications that you have deployed. And then we have the container registry for deployments that you push to Docker, right? You can use the container registry to keep that. Okay, so I wouldn't jump into this slide yet because I want us to look at it and talk about it. Oh, rather, okay, I think I would. So we have the compute instance, right? This slide talks about the Azure ML Compute, and I have my studio open. I believe you can see all of my screen here. I believe so. So I'm just going to come here. I think it's still going to show regardless, right? So I want us to just look at the different compute instances that we have, right, before even going to our demo, because it's important that you understand the compute instance. So I hope that you can see my Azure portal. Okay.
Yes, I can see.
All right, so thank you. I'm just going to come here again and just move this. I don't think I have it here. Okay, so I'll just come to compute. So we just look through it shortly. And so when you come to compute, I have one currently stopped because I'm not using it actively. But under your compute, you have your compute instance, which is used for like training jobs. So you just have like some little training to do, then you can of course use the compute instance. It's very lightweight and good for lightweight jobs, right? And then you have your compute clusters. The good thing about the compute clusters is that they can scale up, so you can use them for jobs, for large scale training jobs, and for deploying models too if it's not a large model. And you can apply like you can choose the number of nodes. Let me just come here. You can choose the number of nodes you would like it to scale up to. So you can start from 0 and you can scale it up to 3 or 4. It's always advisable to leave it at 0 so that if you're not using it, then your money is not running out, right? So, and then we have the Kubernetes cluster, which is good for deployment. It's actually majorly for deploying purposes, right? So you can use that to deploy and manage containerized applications. Another good thing is you can also attach your own compute. So you can bring your own compute device from your local PC and use. And then we have the serverless instance, which is like a total PaaS offering that allows you as a data scientist to just focus on the things you need to do, like coding, designing your model. You don't have, so it's going to manage everything for you. You don't need to know whether you need to use CPU or GPU. You can just, use the serverless instance. Is going to deploy the machine for you completely based on the workload that you're trying to create. Now, for your compute clusters and even for compute instances, when you try to create one, it's going to ask you, are you going for a CPU or GPU model? So someone is asking, what's the difference between the two? The CPU is very good for general purpose projects that don't require large level of workload, right? Why? For your GPU, if you have a workload that will require jobs to be done in small pieces, right? Like small jobs, but they'll be done simultaneously. Of course, you're going to need more resources, and so it's advisable that you use your GPU. But if you're doing just simple training or your workload is very small, please consider using the CPU because it helps you to save cost as well. And even if after this session you want to do your own testing, it's also advisable to use the CPU. But if you're using production level grade, it's a production level grade job, then the GPU is what you should be using, right? So I just wanted to go through our compute. Okay, yeah. So shortly we'll be going to demo, but before we go into demo, I'll just take us through the Azure workspace, the ML Studio workspace completely from scratch, right? So that after today you can come here and nothing will look different or weird. Firstly, okay, so I'm going to close this. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to show you how we get started on using your Azure Machine Learning Studio, right? So let's say you are at your portal.azure.com and you're wondering, how do I get to the Azure ML Studio? First things first is create a resource group. I believe that most people on the call can do that. Once you have a resource group to, like put all of your ML jobs in one place, or at least all of the project related projects in one place, then you can either, I have it here, but you can search for your Azure Machine Learning and there you have it. So once you open it, it gives you the option to create a new workspace. And like I defined, your workspace is how you manage every resources and artifacts that you have created for your Azure Machine Learning project. So we talked about it before. As you can see here, we have the storage account. It's going to ask you to create a new storage account for every workspace that you create. Also, you're going to have to create a key vault so that when you have secrets, like keys for your applications, you can store it in this vault, and then it's also going to ask you to create an application inside to monitor your models, and then, like we said, the container registry. And once I create all of this, I have one created, so I'm not going to, but this is very simple. Once you like put in, I have my machine learning resource group, I can give it a name, can give it a region, excuse me, please. And I can, if I want to continue with the networking and identity, I can do that and then just review and create. And once you create your ML Studio, you have one here. So you click on it, and then if you come here, you can see that there is everything we've created, but this is what is very important, the studio web URL. So you can see it here. So you click on the web URL and it takes you to a new entire page where you have the Azure Machine Learning Studio. And so I'll just start with our notebooks. So okay, yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to see my Visual Studio. I guess that screen is not being shared. Let's see. I'm going to try and share my visual and in Visual Studio Code. Stop sharing, share. Okay, I hope that's it. All right. So this is my Visual Studio Code. Now, for me, because I have Azure signed in already on my Visual Studio Code, so I have some of the resources that I have in the cloud here as well. But we are looking at most, this is my subscription, right? And then these are some of the services that I've worked with. But today we're looking at like your ML. So this is machine learning. It's at the bottom here. I don't know why, but um, so when I launch this, my Visual Studio Code, I can see my workspace that I already created. And under my workspace, I have my jobs, models. Most of these things we'll still talk about it on the studio like UI version, right? But from here, in case you're interested in using your coding option, you can create stuff from here using your YAML file. So for example, this is a YAML file to deploy a compute instance. Now to use this, I would have to sign in to my Azure portal from my Visual Studio. Once I do that, then I can use that to like run the YAML file to create things. So it's not just the compute. As you can see here, there's compute instance, there's their jobs here, their environment. And the good thing about Visual Studio and Azure is that once you click on whatever it is that you want to create, like for example, if it's a compute instance and you click on compute clusters, it automatically generates, once you click on the plus sign here, right? So to generate a config file for you, and all you just need to do is rename. And once you do that, you can just click on the execute YAML file and voila, it works. So I hope you can still see my Azure Studio Code. If you have any questions about that, you can just put it in the chat box so that it's I touch it before we move on to notebooks. So why I went to the Azure Studio Code of Visual Studio Code is because I wanted us to just relate it. Your notebook is essentially your environment where you can write codes within the Azure Machine Learning Studio, right? And there is no one of the good things about the ML Studio is it's agnostic. Agnostic meaning that there is no limit to it's not supporting just a specific vendor. You can do your Jupyter here. You can any of your TensorFlow, all of those, you can actually run it from the notebook. So there's no limitations like, oh, it only works with this vendor, it doesn't work with that vendor. You can do everything here. You can write your code here. You can launch your I'm going to have to start this, but you can also use the CLI version from the notebook. And one of the things talk about when we're looking at the Azure ML Studio, why you should use it is collaboration. So for example, here, if you go to um the ML Studio you created, and you have your like your identity, what's this, identity portal, right? You can give people access to this workspace. So everyone who has access to this workspace can also see the notebook. They can see what you've done there. So it encourages collaboration within your team, right? The next thing we'll look at is the automated ML. This is the future I was talking about that allows you to like sail through. You don't need to know how to code, like mostly extensively know how to code. You can just walk through with the automated LLM. Today we'll be working with the designer. That's where we'll be building our model for today. I'll come back to it shortly. This data is where you can import your data. So for example, if I want to import the data, I'm just going to put this as test and the next. And you can see that there are different places that you can pick your data source from. You can do it from an Azure storage. So if you have one already in a blob storage, I think we'll still be looking at Azure storages in this series, right? So if you have one in the blob storage, file storage, you can just select this and it's going to ask you to put in the URI. You can do one from a SQL Studio. You can do it from your local PC. So I think I have a couple on my local PC, and you can use a web file, right? So that's using URL, but let me see. So you can see here that it tells me if you're uploading from your PC, then I'm going to have to store it on a blob storage. I'm just going to upload a file. We're not going to use it, but just to show us like how it looks. Okay, so I have a depression student data set here. Yeah. So I can just upload that. Still validating the data set anyways. And so this is my data set. It gives me the option to preview it. This is what I have there. And once I'm sure that that's what I want, one of the essential or important things of being a data analyst or data scientist is obviously cleaning your data, ensuring that it is up to par. So yeah, I can click next here and then create. And once I create it, I'll have my data set stored on a blob in Azure for use again in future, right? So that's what the data displays. That's the data column, like I column, no, not column. This aspect is for. Then jobs is to monitor your experiment. So once you start like running a model, you can use the jobs to um, monitor what you have done so far. So these are some of the experiments I've done as a data scientist that I am not, right? And then we have pipelines, and pipelines are more like just steps. It shows like steps of things that you're doing to carry out an experiment, right? So if you have a pipeline, it could be we're going to create a pipeline, of course. It's going to be like a list, a sequence of steps for building a model. Right. And then models are your finished data job. And here you can see them and work with them. You can, okay, once they are deployed, they become a model. And then endpoints are where you consume those models that you have created. So you can get the endpoint URL, yeah, and then consume it from here. So that's finished. And of course, at the bottom here, you have your compute, which we have gone through already. I'm going to start this again. Let me see, fresh, it started. And then I'm going to go to monitoring. So monitoring is, of course, where you monitor your model from. So today for our demo, we'll be looking at, where is my presentation? Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So we'll be looking at two layers on our demo. First is we'll be training a no-code regression model. And secondly, we'll be using the designer to deploy the model that we have created. So two things, train a no-code regression model. We're using linear regression algorithm. And then after that, we would be deploying the machine learning model to somewhere so that anyone else can consume it or use it for their own personal projects. Or if it's an organization, they can use it for their projects too. All right. If you have any questions, please let me know before we start the demo. All right. Just counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All right then. So I'm starting demo, and we are starting with the designer. Right. Now, the good thing about Azure is the ML Studio is that they are already pre-built pipelines that you can work with here, as you can see. But we'll be creating our own pipeline just for the purpose of the demo. So, and I'll be using a sample data set from the Azure environment, right? So we have the automobile data set here. I'll be dragging it in. Now, before you continue, you can actually preview your data to see what you have, just like we did with the other data set of the depression data set. We can also come here, expand this, and then just see what we have. So you can see, this is like how it's going to appear on Excel. You can see your columns, normalized losses, the make of, this is an automobile pricing data set. So you can see the make of your car, the fuel type, gas, the aspiration, number of doors, blah, 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 a whole lot of stuff are in this data. And then we have the pricing of all of these cars based on the features that they have, right? So that's the data set we are working with today to build our model. And once you have dragged your data set to the designer, next thing, what's the next thing to do? As a data analyst, you probably would clean your data. As a data scientist, you probably want to clean your data, right? So next thing to do will be to clean our data. So to do that, we'll be selecting columns, all columns. And so you clear all of the columns in your data set. So this is almost like you are programming, but instead of like programming, you are doing a drag and drop, right, on your code. But it's also good to have a sense of direction on what you want to achieve while you're doing this. It's just like if you're using your Power Query to maybe clean your data set or transform your data set, obviously you need to know what you want to do with your Power Query. So that's the same thing we are doing here with um our designer. So I'm gonna pull this here, and then you can see that it still has like the caution sign. So we have to like select. So yeah, let me just say you can double click on this and you can edit your column, right? And once you do that, you can select all columns. And also, if you would like to exclude a particular column, you can just click on the plus sign here and do an exclude. And then you can say, okay, column names, and this is the column that I'll be excluding for this project, right? And like I said, it's almost like you're programming. And when we're programming, we always put comment, or maybe not everybody share, but most times it's always for this too, it's good to add a comment, or so that whoever is looking at your diagram or workflow knows that, okay, this is what this thing is doing for each of the steps here. So I'm just going to write this, select all columns except normalized loss. So that's what we did in this stage of our diagram, of our designing, right? So once you do that, you can save it and you can just close it. And then next thing, we want to check that there are no missing columns. I mean, most times if you're doing this on Excel too, you would definitely check that there is, if there are missing data or, sorry, data or null data, you can actually clean that up as well. So same thing here, you just drag it. And of course, we want to check all of the column. If there's any null data sets, we want that to be cleaned. And I will still just do the same thing again, clean missing data. I'm going to add a column. Oh, it's just the same, very simple stuff. Okay, so I'm going to save this. And once that's done, so this process is just building your pipeline. Like we said, pipeline are a sequence of steps that you take to build your model. So we are just building those steps now. Right. So after we've cleaned our data, now we have a clean data set. Then the next thing, of course, we want to do is split these data sets. If you remember our life cycle, you remember that we have an historical data and then we have two types of data. So we have your training data and your testing data. So we want to split this. And so we'll drag this pot here. And now for this project, you can have a split of 50-50. So 50% of your data you use for training, 50% of your data can be used for testing. But for this, I'm going to make it 0.7 so that we can use 70% of our data to train our model, and then we use 30% of our data to train, to test rather, not to train. So I'm going to also put that here so that whoever is looking at my flow can say, okay, this person used 70% of our data, to train. So just gonna set it to this. If you're wondering how the 0.7 is, that's 70 divided by 100. I'm just in case. Okay. So once we save that, we have our split data. Now we split our data into two, right? And the next thing, if you remember, our machine learning cycle is our algorithm. So I'm going to pull the linear regression algorithm. Now, the good thing about this is you see how easy it is for you to just like pull stuffs and just put it here. You could also do this with coding, but it might probably take most of your time. But what Azure Machine Learning Studio has done for you is has put that into bits and pieces such that all you need to do is either drag it if you're using this designer or any of the other processes, right? So just drag it, and then once you drag it, we are using linear regression to train our model. So I'm going to pick out the train model, and this is very easy to do. I mean, I'm not a data scientist, maybe a bit of data analyst, but I mean, and I can do this. So that means you can also take our time to, do this as well. So once this is our algorithm, right? We are training the model, and you just pass your algorithm into train model. And then of course, you can't just pass the algorithm, you need a data set to train. So that's how we are pushing our 70% to train this model, right? So once we do that, we need a column. Now, the column we are selecting here is the column that we want to, so linear regression is like the relationship between two different futures or multiple futures and one future. In this case, we are looking at the price of the car against all the other features of the car, right? That's what we are building our model against. So we are looking at the correlation between the price of the car as well as the other features of the car. So for here, I'm just going to click price and enter price here. Price. And once you do that, you can save it. After you save it, you can then close this. So we have our model for training and we have our split data. And then once we have created our training model, then we can go next to scoring the model, right? So scoring the model would now involve scoring these data sets. So we are going to drag the trained model already, which has gone through our algorithm, is now trained into here. And then remember that 30% that we still had left, we're going to pull it into this pot here so that we can now test our trained model and see if it actually meets the criteria of what we want. And then the last thing we'll just do, if you remember our life cycle, is evaluate the model, right? So just pick your evaluate model and then drag this into this, and that's the end of our flow. So the reasoning is just think about the machine learning model, lifecycle model, and it's going to literally guide you on how to build your designer, right? And then you can configure, give it a name. I'm going to give it ML deployment, sorry, ML, let's say model 002. So this might take a while. All right, so we can review. Oh, okay, so there's a problem here. I'm just going to select a cluster. Let's see, that one is stopped. Don't want to create a cluster. I'm going to change this to a compute instance. I have this guy stopped. Need some money, but I'm going to create a new one. It shouldn't take time. Let's see, ML compute 002. And I'm just going to select a general purpose version, save cost, and then create. So it might take a while for these to create. In the meantime, let me come to my computer. Oh, cancel. So I can't leave this page until this is done. All right, so we might just have to wait a bit. Oh my God. For this to just finish. It don't take so much time. Gazi, you seem on mute. You seem like you have a question.
No, I don't. I don't have a question.
Okay. All right. Sorry, this would just take little time. But in the meantime, I hope that we are all like learning and has been a good experience so far. Mm, let's see. Let me go to the other page and just so we just look at others why that is running. So we can come to our pipeline. And then on this pipeline page, so your pipeline is like steps that you have run before. Now, if you look at this is one of the projects I ran earlier, and it took 5 minutes, 10 seconds, right? So, but this is the exact same data set that we had. If you look at it, nothing has changed, just the same exact one, right? And then I have deployed, or rather, I've configured this one as a model. So I can come to the job overview here and look at the metrics. Now, there are some metrics here. Like we said, okay, the compute is done, so we'll go back to it shortly. But there are metrics that you will say, okay, this data set has to meet for us to be able to deploy it as a model. These are some of them. And if I'm looking at this, well, I'm going to just say the you can read about this. I think the mean absolute error looks good from what I can see. And because of that, you would have the option to actually deploy this as a model. So there was a test I did with the depression data set, and the this value, the mean absolute error was like 0 point something, which is not good, I suspect, because didn't get the option to deploy that as a model. I'm sure Azure was like, you can't deploy this is rubbish, right? So, but yeah, if of course, as a data scientist, there are things that you're looking out for in your model, and this is definitely one of the things you're looking out for. So you can come to the metrics page to say, did this meet all of the criteria that we wanted to meet? If it did meet it, then I can deploy this and push it as a model. So I'm going to come back here and pick okay, it's done, it's running. And then I can review and submit. And then this is going to just be like what we have here essentially, right? And so let me see. I don't think I can still deploy this because I already deployed it as a model. Well, I did that ahead because this takes a lot of time to push, right? So once it's complete, we'll go back to it once it's complete again. Come back to jobs. Let me come back here. Jobs, sorry, pipelines. So this is running now. This also under pipelines, you can see things that are running. You can also come to jobs as well. See if I can refresh this. I'm just going to have to remember the name of what I'm running currently. Excuse me. So this is running, and this is a batch that I have already created for inferencing. So inferencing is also like deploying. There is the part where you train your model, and there's the part where you like push it for real world usage, right? So that's the point where you inference your data. Now for this, we'll do it together. I mean, we'll just wait for that model to completely run, and then would try to create it for inferencing. So in inferencing, if you look, it's almost the same thing. You can see the same data set, but like the training step is taken out and the split set is taken out, and then it's replaced with other things like the score model is still replaced, the evaluate model is still there, but you have like your web service output, you have applied transformation, and you have web service input. So this is preparing it to be pushed to a web service where it can be consumed by people outside, right? Let me see if this is complete yet. Let's see, is it complete yet? Still running. Oh, no, that's the compute. So at this point, it's still at this level and still running. So we might need to wait a bit more. But yeah, while we are still waiting, we can definitely look through the ones that I've completed, right? So once you have this created for inferencing, like I said, what we have done first is we trained our data sets. After training your data set and you have confirmed that, oh, this data set meets all of the metrics, then you can push it out to be deployed for consumption. And the process of pushing it out to be deployed for consumption is inferencing, which we'll do shortly together. But here is a data set that has been inferenced completely, right? So this is how it looks. And once that's done, you can actually deploy this into a Kubernetes compute. So I have that here. And once you deploy it into a Kubernetes compute, it becomes a model that anybody can consume and use, right? So this is one that I've pushed into my AKS, and I can just share the endpoint with anybody that needs to use it. You can use it. So if I click on this, if you're writing if you're building an application and you probably want to use, maybe you're building a car app, for example, and you want to be able to predict the amount of cars based on the future that they have, then obviously this is what you can consume this data set. Yeah. So I'm just going to see again. Has this finished? Nope. Has it finished? Not yet. Let me see. Um, still running here. Right. So while this is running, does anyone have any questions? Hi guys, any questions on designing pipelines, models, on your compute, data storage? This the ML Studio literally combines all of. Okay, Mr. Kukola, yeah, you have a question.
Okay, Damilola, thank you so much for this presentation. My question will be on the subscription side
Okay,
because
sir.
this is not a free service. And
Yes.
I know as MCT, we have access to 100 USD, but when I saw your own subscription, it was 170 something. So which is
No, it's 117. It's 150. I think it's 150. Everybody has access.
it's over 100. I'm just asking, how can we have access, or as MCT, can we also have access to this Visual Studio Enterprise subscription?
Oh.
As an MCT, I think yes, you should as an MCT.
Imon, let me speak to that. So
Okay.
depending on, there are two categories of subscription that comes for an MCT, depending on the exam that used to become an MCT. Like
Yes,
for
you are
some
correct.
MCT, the virtual student enterprise subscription that comes in is for $150 credits every month. Why maybe like for if you maybe you got your MCT by is it 500, is it 400, any of those developers exams, then maybe with MS 700 or so, those one comes with a different subscriptions, which is $100 credit. So I'm not sure those ones are eligible for Azure services. I'm not 100% sure of them.
I think I can remember the developer, they have more credits than
Yeah.
other categories.
Yeah,
Is
some
that
is 150. Yeah, some is 150, some is 100, yeah.
for some of us in data category, our own is 100, where developers, they have higher subscription rates, I think.
Oh.
I
Yes,
think
that's correct.
some MCT receive two. They have the
Okay.
normal $100 credit for
Okay.
Azure services. Then we also have 150 for Visual Studio.
Me, I don't have that one. I will see you behind the scene.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
All right.
Arun. Yeah.
Yes, sir. All right. So I think that answers the question. If you guys are wondering, MCT is like the Microsoft certified trainer. So yeah. No, just discussing the benefits. So this is a completed pipeline, and yeah, from here now we can actually train it. Oh, sorry, inference this one. So is it the same one? Yeah, same one. So I can come to my job overview, confirm that, then go to pipelines. Okay, completed one. See. So option to inference. So this is how you can create an inference pipeline. Like I said again, I'll just repeat it. Inferencing is when you push it to be used for real world things like consumption. So I'm clicking on real-time inference pipeline. And once I do that, it's going to automatically create so you don't have to worry about dragging and dropping this one because Azure does that for you already. So you can see that what I had before has been transformed to what this is now. So it takes out the training and then just adds the necessary parts. And then once this is done, I can decide to configure and submit. So this is going to take another long time to run. It takes a while. Sometimes it takes 10 to 20 minutes to finish each of the pipeline jobs that it does. But once you have this like this, I just wanted to show you how to convert it from your training model to an inferencing model. And that's how to convert it. I'll just take it again in case someone missed that. So you come to pipelines and then click on the pipeline that you have used for your training, right? So we have all of our steps here. And then once you do that, you can just come here, create an inference pipeline, and then real time. And once that is done, you can now deploy it as a model, which we have seen. So if I come back to my pipelines again, I'll just show us one of the ones that this is like a real-time inference. You can see here. This is what it looks like when it's complete, and then you can see the option to deploy it here. So when you click on deploy, you can either choose AKS compute, or if you're using a container, you can also deploy it to a container instance. For me, I did push it to AKS compute, and once I did that, I had it deployed as a model here. So this is the model, and now anybody that wants to use it for any kind of application can decide to use it. So I think that's the end really of this. I hope that everyone like understands the concept of the Azure ML Studio, and it's easier next time you see the place or see the environment. It's not daunting. You can easily walk through the notebooks, designers, data, jobs, and just go through it. Shouldn't be too difficult. That's the end
All
of
right.
today's session. So,
Thank you very much, Damilola. That was a great and a deep dive presentation from you. And I believe the participant has learned a lot. So it is time for question and answers. If you have any question that you think you can ask the speaker, please feel free to come forward and ask. Okay, Olga, go ahead, sir.
All right. Thank you, the moderator, and thank you, the presenter, for this insightful session. I have two comments to make. One is a remark, and the other one is just knowledge sharing. The remark I have is that when I started my journey on data, I think I started from the perspective of being a data scientist. At a point, I ran away when we started doing all these abracadabra, using Python to do all this. I think Microsoft has simplified the process. So
yes,
using Python to do all this was very difficult for me at that point in time because it was not a plug and play. You need to know coding and you need to know programming.
That ran away.
That's what made me to run away, because the way you are doing it now, it has been simplified by plug and play.
Yeah.
My professor used to call it clickology. That at this point in time that I came to this age, we are not doing big stops. We are just making use of click and all the parameters behind the scene are just running, and we are seeing the result. I think for me, this is the best tool for data scientists in terms of modeling, in terms of machine learning stuffs. That's number one. Then number two, I have a good takeaway from your presentation. as a technical person or as a Microsoft certified trainer, I have a learning note from your presentation. And because sometimes you'll be making a presentation and you are stopped. You are stuck, just waiting for a process to rerun it again. So, but the way you have done it is such a case that you have a it's like you have a prototype of what you want to present, so that when you are doing a real life demo and you are stuck along the line, you can fall back to a demo that you have done before, and that's bridge a gap between waiting for a new process to start and complete and then flowing along with your presentation. That's a good one for me, and I think it's a lesson note for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for that
Also, I just
comment.
wanted to say that regarding, I mean, it depends on the project you're running. There's probably still always going to be coding, right? Because that's why the notebook is there. In case you want to exercise or flex your coding muscles, you can actually code too.
Yes.
So,
I told you I don't like coding.
I'm just for those that like it.
So that being said, is there any other question from anyone? Thank you very much, Ogagbola, for that insight.
Yeah, thank you, boss.
So I would say that the presenter has done a great job, and well done, Loa Damilola. So these sections will be wrapped up for like the study series we started in the first week of November. Will be wrapped up. I think next week is the last weekend that we have. Yeah, that's it. So although there was a section that we moved forward to first week of December, that is 7th of December. So we still have 2 sections ahead. We have one coming up next week. We have 2 sections coming up next week, and we have one section that was pushed forward last week on the 7th of December. So links to these sections are going to be shared with us. So please feel free to join and stay connected with the community on our LinkedIn page, our Meetup pages, and WhatsApp as well. So if you are not on WhatsApp, you can reach out to me or anyone. We're going to share the link with you. So this is an open forum whereby everybody comes together to learn. Thank you once again. Thank you.